Welcome to a deep dive into the world of AstraZeneca. We're going to be looking at their 9M 2024 results report, kind of like a financial health checkup for this pharmaceutical giant.
Yeah, and just like a checkup, we'll be looking at the good and, well, maybe not so good. But what's really interesting here is this report, it's more than just numbers. It gives us a glimpse into the future of global health trends, research directions, and even, well, a bit of a story unfolding in China.
Okay, so first the big news. AstraZeneca is doing really well financially.
Hmm.
They've actually blown past their own predictions for both revenue and earnings.
Right.
Their total revenue is up by 19%, which is huge,
Yeah.
and that puts them at $39,182 million.
Wow, that's a billion with a B.
Exactly. Now, earnings per share, which is basically how much profit they're making for each share of stock, that's also up 11% to $6.12.
That's impressive, but there's a little asterisk there. That number includes some one-time gains from last year, so it's not all pure growth from their core business.
Right, so think of it like finding a $20 bill in your coat pocket.
Oh.
It's nice, but it doesn't mean you suddenly got a raise.
Exactly.
So the growth is still strong, but maybe not as dramatic as that first number makes it seem.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Okay, so let's dig into where this growth is actually coming from.
Right.
AstraZeneca focuses on a few key therapeutic areas, and it's pretty clear that oncology, which is cancer treatment, is their star performer.
Oncology is booming right now, and unfortunately that reflects the fact that cancer is becoming more common globally, but it also means there's a lot of research and development happening, which leads to new treatments.
And new treatments mean more revenue, right?
Exactly.
So within oncology, a few drugs are really standing out. First, there's Tagrisso. It's a lung cancer treatment, and it saw a 15% increase in revenue.
Agrisha is a big one.
It is. A lot of that growth is because it's now being used to treat patients in earlier stages of the disease,
Oh, I see.
which is a big shift in how lung cancer is being managed.
Yeah, that makes sense. Earlier treatment can make a huge difference for patients.
Absolutely. Then we have Imfinzi, which is an immunotherapy drug. It's up 22% because it's proving effective against multiple types of cancer, like bladder, liver, and lung cancer.
Immunotherapy is really changing the game for a lot of cancer patients.
Now get this. Their breast cancer drug Enhertu, this one is seeing explosive growth. I'm talking a 60% increase in revenue.
Wow, 60%.
60%. It's becoming a standard treatment for certain types of breast cancer, specifically HER2 positive and even HER2 low breast cancers.
HR2. So just for our listeners, HR2 is a protein that can fuel tumor growth.
Exactly. And some breast cancers have a lot of this protein that's HER2 positive, while others have lower levels that's HER2 low. And now HER2 is showing promise for both.
That's really significant, addressing such a critical need in breast cancer treatment.
All right, let's switch gears now to CVRM.
CDRM.
Yes. Don't worry, it's not as complicated as it sounds. CVRM stands for cardiovascular, renal, and metabolism. These are basically the medications that manage conditions like heart disease, kidney problems, and diabetes.
Oh, right. Those are huge areas.
Huge. And unfortunately, they affect a lot of people worldwide.
Yeah, sadly they do.
So AstraZeneca's CVRM portfolio is up 21%, which shows how important these treatments are.
Consistent, steady growth.
Their big winner in this category is Farxiga. It's a drug for diabetes and heart failure, and it's up a whopping 34%.
That's a big jump.
It is. And what's interesting is that Farxiga's growth is actually outpacing the overall market growth for those types of medications.
So it's not just that more people need those drugs, it's that more people are choosing Farxiga specifically.
Exactly. The report says this is partly because of new cardiorenal guidelines. Doctors are basically recognizing the benefits of Farxiga for a wider range of patients.
So they're expanding the use of it. Interesting.
All right, let's move on to RNI.
Okay, what's RNI?
RNI stands for respiratory and immunology. This area is also seeing strong growth, up 24%.
Wow, 24% is big.
It is. This is being driven by new products and expanding the use of some of their existing medications.
This is where you really see the constant evolution of the pharmaceutical world. You've got established treatments like Symbicort, which is for asthma.
Right?
It's facing competition from generics now, so its growth is flat in some regions.
I see.
But then at the same time, you have innovations like Breztri, which is a triple inhaler therapy, and it's the fastest growing treatment in its class.
Okay, so it's like a constant push and pull between the old and the new.
Exactly.
And finally, we have the rare disease category. This is a smaller market overall, but it's still growing steadily at 14%.
Rare diseases can be really tough to treat because they affect fewer people, so it's harder to do research and development, but it's so important for the patients who rely on those treatments.
Absolutely. And AstraZeneca's top performer in this area is Ultomiris, which treats certain rare blood and neurological disorders. It's seen a 35% jump.
35%. That's fantastic.
Yeah, it is. Part of that is because it's being used more widely, and part of it is because patients are switching from its predecessor, Soliris.
Ah, so it's an improved version.
You could say that,
So it seems like things are going great for AstraZeneca.
well, it's not all smooth sailing. Even with all this success, their report does mention some challenges.
Right, of course. Drug development is a really complicated process. There are bound to be some setbacks along the way.
One of their asthma drugs, Fasenra, didn't perform as well as they hoped in a trial for chronic rhinosinusitis, which is basically when your sinuses are inflamed all the time.
Sinus problems can be so frustrating.
They can. And another potential treatment for lung cancer, this one's called datopotamab deruxtecan. Try saying that 3 times fast.
Oh my goodness.
Well, this one didn't quite hit the mark in one of its trials either.
So even with all the expertise and resources that these companies have, it's still a gamble sometimes.
It is. But these setbacks are also valuable learning experiences. They help AstraZeneca figure out what works, what doesn't, and how to improve your research moving forward.
Makes sense. You learn from your mistakes, right?
Exactly. Now, here's something I found really interesting in the report. AstraZeneca is working on a new propellant for their inhalers, the devices that deliver asthma medication.
Yeah.
And this new propellant is 99.9% better for the environment.
Wow, almost 100%.
Yet it has a much lower global warming potential.
That's great. It shows they're thinking about sustainability, not just treating diseases.
Exactly. It signals that they're in it for the long haul and thinking about their impact on the planet.
It's definitely a good sign for investors, too.
Okay, there's one more thing we need to talk about, and it's a bit of a curveball.
Mm.
The situation in China.
Ah, yes, the China situation.
Things are getting a little complicated over there.
It sounds like something out of a spy movie.
A little bit. So the report mentions that Chinese authorities are conducting investigations involving some current and former AstraZeneca employees.
Investigations, what are they looking into?
The allegations are pretty serious. We're talking about things like medical insurance fraud, illegal drug importation, and breaches of personal information.
Oh, wow. That's pretty heavy stuff.
It is. And to make matters even more intriguing, their China president was actually detained for a while.
No way, really?
Yeah, it's a whole thing. Now, it's important to note that AstraZeneca itself hasn't been officially notified that they're under investigation, and they've said they'll fully cooperate with the authorities.
But still, this whole situation has to be a concern for them, right? China is a huge market for pharmaceutical companies.
Absolutely. It raises questions about their future in China and how this will all play out.
Yeah, there's definitely some uncertainty there.
Okay, before we move on, let's do a quick financial deep dive, but we'll keep it simple. Overall, AstraZeneca's profit margins are pretty stable.
Okay, profit margins. That means how much profit they're making compared to their overall revenue.
Right. But there is a bit of downward pressure on those margins.
Oh, what's causing that?
Well, they're increasingly relying on profit-sharing agreements for some of their most successful drugs, like Lynparza and Enhertu. This basically means they're splitting the profits with their partners.
I see. So that cuts into their overall margins, even though the drugs are doing well.
Right. Now, on the other hand, their spending on research and development is up, which is usually a good sign. It means they're investing in the future and trying to create new drugs.
It's a balancing act, right? They need to spend money to make money, but they also need to be smart about it.
And speaking of investments, that leads us right into the exciting world of AstraZeneca's drug pipeline. This is where we see the potential future blockbusters, the therapies that could change the game for patients all over the world. But we'll have to save that for the next part of our deep dive.
All right, looking forward to it. So we were just talking about how AstraZeneca is investing a lot in R&D. That takes us right into their drug pipeline, the stuff that could be huge for them and for patients too.
Yeah, like potential game changers in the world of medicine.
Exactly.
So, where do we even begin with all this? It's a pretty vast landscape of research and development.
Well, a good place to start is with the recent regulatory approvals and submissions. These are like, milestones on the path to actually bringing a new drug to market.
Okay, so it's not just about the science in the lab. It's about getting these discoveries approved and actually available to the people who need them.
Right. That's the whole point, right?
Exactly. Give us some examples.
Okay, so let's take Tagrisso. We've already talked about how well it's doing. It recently got approval in the U.S. for treating a specific type of lung cancer in patients who haven't responded to other therapies. So it's like they're expanding its use.
So this could help a whole new group of patients.
Yeah, potentially a lot of people. It's a smart strategy for AstraZeneca. They're not just letting their patents expire, they're finding new ways to use their existing drugs.
It's like maximizing their investment.
Exactly. And it's not just about expanding the use of existing drugs, they've also got some promising new ones in the pipeline.
Like
Well, there's Imfinzi, their immunotherapy drug. It's been getting approved all over the place. Like in Europe, it just got approved for a type of endometrial cancer.
endometrial cancer, that's cancer of the uterus, right?
That's right. And it can be used with or without Lynparza, which is another one of their cancer drugs.
So it's like a combination therapy.
Yeah, and that's becoming more and more common in cancer treatment, using multiple drugs that attack cancer cells in different ways.
Makes sense, like hitting it from all angles.
Exactly. And speaking of Imfinzi, it's also under priority review in the U.S. for treating small cell lung cancer. That's a big deal because patients with that type of cancer often don't have a lot of treatment options.
Priority review, that means the FDA is fast-tracking it, right?
Yep. They recognize the potential of this drug and want to get it to patients faster.
So less red tape, quicker access.
Right.
Okay, this next one is exciting. Remember Enhertu, the breast cancer drug?
Yeah, the one with the huge growth.
That's the one. Well, it's also getting the fast-track treatment in the U.S., this time for treating HER2 low breast cancer.
Oh, wow, that's big.
It is. Because until recently, that type of breast cancer wasn't considered as responsive to HER2 targeted therapies.
So now they're finding ways to help those patients too.
And the good news keeps coming for Enhertu. It's also racking up approvals in China. They just got the green light for treating HER2 positive gastric cancer and a specific type of lung cancer with HER2 mutations.
China is a massive market for pharmaceuticals.
It is. So these approvals are a big deal for AstraZeneca.
For sure. But, you know, drug development is a risky business. Not every trial is going to be a success.
Yeah, that's true. The report acknowledges some setbacks, which we kind of talked about earlier.
Setbacks are inevitable in this field. It's all about learning from those setbacks and moving forward.
So one example is AstraZeneca, their asthma drug. It didn't meet its primary endpoints in a trial for chronic rhinosinusitis with nasal polyps.
Nasal polyps. Oof. Those sound unpleasant.
They can be. And endpoints, those are basically the specific goals that researchers are looking for in a clinical trial.
Right, like are they trying to reduce symptoms, improve survival rates, things like that?
Exactly. And in this case, AstraZeneca just didn't achieve those goals.
Doesn't necessarily mean they'll abandon it altogether, though. They might find it works for a specific group of patients, or maybe they need to adjust the dosage or how they're conducting the trial.
Okay, so it's not a complete failure.
Not at all.
Speaking of trials and results, there's another drug, datopotamab deruxtecan.
Let's just call it Dato-DXd.
DXD, much easier. Well, this one had some mixed results. In one trial, it showed some promising activity in treating a certain type of lung cancer, but it didn't reach statistical significance for overall survival.
Statistical significance. That basically means they need to be really confident that the results they're seeing are actually due to the drug and not just random chance.
Right. And in this case, they didn't quite reach that level of confidence.
So it's back to the drawing board for Dato-DXd, at least for now. More research is needed.
So let's zoom out for a second. What does all this mean for the average person who's following AstraZeneca's progress?
Well, I think it shows that AstraZeneca is really pursuing a lot of different avenues of research. They're not putting all their eggs in one basket.
They're diversifying their portfolio.
Exactly. They're building on their existing drugs, trying new approaches, and exploring new markets. It's all about staying ahead of the curve.
And what about the whole China situation? How does that fit into all of this?
That's a great question. Those investigations in China definitely add a layer of complexity to their global strategy. China is a crucial market for any pharmaceutical company, and any disruption there could have huge implications.
Yeah, like we were saying earlier, it raises a lot of questions about their future in China.
Definitely. And it goes beyond just AstraZeneca's bottom line. It raises broader questions about transparency and ethical conduct in the entire pharmaceutical industry.
Especially in a market like China where there's already a lot of scrutiny.
Right. Building and maintaining trust is absolutely essential for these companies, especially when you're dealing with people's health.
So how AstraZeneca handles this situation will be watched very closely.
Oh, yeah, for sure. It's a delicate balance. They need to cooperate with the authorities, but they also need to protect their own interests and their reputation. It'll be interesting to see how this all plays out.
It definitely adds an element of suspense to this story.
For sure. And, you know, beyond just AstraZeneca, I think these investigations tell us something about the bigger picture in the pharmaceutical industry, especially in China.
What do you mean?
Well, it seems like the Chinese government is getting more serious about regulating healthcare. They're cracking down on corruption, trying to make drugs more affordable, and ensuring the quality and safety of medications. These investigations could be a sign of things to come.
So potentially a tougher environment for pharmaceutical companies operating in China?
Yeah, possibly. And that could have ripple effects beyond China. If companies face stricter rules there, it could influence their practices globally, even affecting drug prices and availability in other countries.
It's all connected.
Exactly. So we've covered a lot of ground here. We've looked at AstraZeneca's financials, their drug pipeline, and these challenges they're facing in China.
We've seen their successes, their setbacks, and the uncertainties they're navigating.
That's a complex story.
It is, but there's one more question we need to address. What does all this mean for the future of healthcare and the pharmaceutical industry as a whole?
That's the big question, isn't it? And that's what we'll be exploring in the final part of our deep dive.
So we've spent a lot of time digging into the details of AstraZeneca's performance, their successes, their challenges, and those unexpected twists and turns, especially over in China.
Yeah, it's been quite a ride.
It has. But now it's time to zoom out and think about the bigger picture.
Right, the so what question.
Exactly. What does AstraZeneca's story tell us about the future of the pharmaceutical industry? And, more importantly, what does it mean for patients?
That's the key question, isn't it?
It is. So what are your thoughts?
Well, one thing that stands out to me is AstraZeneca's focus on specialty medicines, especially in areas like oncology and rare diseases. This seems to be a trend across the industry, a shift towards more personalized medicine, therapies that are tailored to an individual's specific needs.
So we're moving away from the one-size-fits-all approach.
Exactly. And while this is incredibly exciting, it also brings up some tough questions about affordability.
Right, because these new treatments are often very expensive.
They are. So how do we ensure that everyone who needs these life-saving medications can actually get them? How do we balance the need for innovation with the need for access?
It's a tough challenge, for sure. Companies need to make a profit to fund research and development, but healthcare is also a fundamental human right.
Absolutely. And this is where the China situation becomes even more interesting.
How so?
Well, if those investigations lead to stricter price controls or regulations in China, it could have a ripple effect throughout the entire global market.
You mean it could impact drug prices in other countries?
Potentially, yeah. It's a reminder that the pharmaceutical industry is a global network, and what happens in one place can have far-reaching consequences.
It's like a domino effect.
Kind of, yeah. But beyond the financial aspects, those investigations also highlight the importance of trust
Trust between who?
between pharmaceutical companies and everyone else, patients, doctors, regulators, the public. People need to feel confident that these companies are operating ethically and putting patients first.
Because at the end of the day, it's about people's lives.
Exactly. Now, shifting gears a bit, another takeaway from AstraZeneca's report is the sheer pace of innovation. Their pipeline is packed with potential new therapies.
Yeah, we talked about some of those earlier, like the new inhalers with a lower environmental impact.
Right, and there's a lot more where that came from. Cutting-edge cancer treatments, new approaches to managing chronic diseases. It's really remarkable.
It is. But is there a downside to all this innovation?
Well, as we develop more complex treatments, there's always the risk of unforeseen side effects or unintended consequences.
So we need to be cautious.
Absolutely. We need rigorous clinical trials, careful monitoring, and open discussions about the potential risks and benefits.
So patients can make informed decisions.
Exactly. It's not just about creating new drugs, it's about using them responsibly.
That makes sense. So as we wrap up our deep dive into AstraZeneca, what's the one big takeaway you want our listeners to think about?
I'd say this. The future of healthcare is being shaped by forces much bigger than any one company or government. It's a complex mix of science, economics, ethics, and societal values. But by staying informed, asking questions, and being part of the conversation, we can all help shape a healthier future for everyone.
Well said. And that concludes our deep dive into the world of AstraZeneca. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.